it was one of those mornings where I woke up, and because I got to be on the air so early, I'm usually up, by like 5 a.m., right? And so I grab my phone. First thing I do, turn off the alarm, grab my phone, and I go to Twitter, and I'm fully expecting to see all the tweets about Nick Sirianni fired overnight. Bill Belichick en route to Philadelphia. And here we are, 1:06 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday, and Nick Sirianni still has a job. I'm shocked.
Yeah. No, I know. It is surprising because you thought that the trigger would have been pulled almost immediately. It had that weight to it,
It
right?
did. It did.
Cowboys situation a little bit like that as well, but I think
very much so.
Sirianni, they had such a monumental collapse that it felt like that was going to be the one that was just going to snap at the at the first sign of the season being over.
To me, what's so funny about the Cowboys and Eagles, like the difference, right? The Cowboys felt like they were underprepared, right? They felt like it felt like Dan Quinn was a little checked out for this game. He's already making plans to, maybe take the Seattle job. It felt like, offensively, Mike McCarthy pooped his pants and they just were unprepared. But the Eagles felt like they rolled over and died. Like, we just don't care. It's apathy. Like we don't like our coach. We hate each other. It was such a different type of feeling. For Dallas, it felt literally like, no, this team cares. They're just not prepared. And then for Philadelphia, it's like, this team just doesn't care. It just doesn't care at all. And they're completely apathetic. Yeah. So obviously the two shocking losses of the wild card weekend, and the NFC beast is in shambles right now.
That it sure is. Yeah, quite a list of quarterbacks that we have competing in the NFC playoff side of things for sure. So that is just one of the a few storylines that were developed over this past weekend. Here we go, wild card recap on the Football Lab. All right, so and then there were 8. We have 8 teams remaining in the NFL playoff landscape, 2 of which have yet to play a postseason game. So the 49ers and Ravens, will get to see them ball out this upcoming weekend. But we had 6 advance from this past weekend slate of games. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, we had games, had to shuffle a little bit, some crazy weather. But for the most part, a lot of what we expected from this, wild card weekend. And at the same time, you had some, I mean, disappointing maybe, but just really almost non-competitive games during this weekend slate. It was a little bit of a slow, kind of sluggish and rough start, I think, to the 2024 playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I looking back on it, I'm like, I was 5-1 in my picks for the games, but it just still felt like you didn't see things clearly. I thought Houston-Cleveland was going to be a close game. It was a blowout. I thought the Packers were going to get blown out. They blew out the Cowboys. You look at the Miami Dolphin Kansas City game. We thought weather would be a way bigger factor. I think we both thought lower scoring, close game. Wasn't that at all. Then obviously with the Bills and Steelers getting moved, that was a game that looked like it was going to be a blowout that the Steelers found a way to claw back in. There was just a lot of, you start going game by game as we'll pick apart. Every single game, even though I was 5 of the 6 games got right, it still felt like I just didn't have the right read on the way the games were going to go. And so that's what's such a fun part about the NFL playoffs, is it really is the one sport, unlike a 7-game series in the NBA. Or if you have a goalie who's standing on their head and is the hottest goalie in the world right now, that it seems more predictable. These games can be anything but. And I can't wait to digest some of these games, hear your thoughts on them. I know I'm just, there's so much flowing around my head right now about each one of these performances and some of these losing teams, like where they go from here. We already kind of talked about with Philly and Dallas. Seems like the offseason is just getting more and more interesting by the minute, and it's not going to slow down at all for some of these teams now that big expectations and big disappointments.
Yeah, that's almost what makes the thumbnail for this episode, relevant is
Yeah.
a few of those teams literally have fallen off a cliff. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, the state of their franchise is completely in flux for several of these losing teams, others not so much. But yeah, excited to dive into things, and we'll start with the in order with the Saturday game and games, I should say, but the first of which being the Cleveland Browns at the Houston Texans, our first taste of the postseason this year. And, the Cleveland Browns really didn't put up much of a fight at all in this one. The playoffs started with an absolute blowout by the Houston Texans. CJ Stroud, coming strong onto the scene here as a rookie quarterback. 45-14 win. Houston advances. Home game for them. They were a home underdog, a rarity in the NFL playoffs, but that's what the case was for them. And, it was anything but in terms of the performance on the field. CJ Stroud led the troops. Really a complete game as well. It wasn't like they put up, a huge second quarter and that was it. No, they consistently scored every quarter of this whole game to the point where with about 8 minutes and 45 seconds left, they pulled all of their meaningful starters.
Yeah.
That is that might be as big of a win, in addition to just the win itself for Houston, that they're able to get CJ Stroud out of there and protect his health and, a little bit of rest. I mean, that's what a way to start your postseason career for DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud. Incredible effort by Houston here. And the Joe Flacco wave came crashing down.
Yeah, it felt like the wheels just completely came off for Cleveland. And that takes nothing against what Cleveland has done this year. What Cleveland did with the insane amount of injuries, with the quarterback changes, for them to get to this point and to be favorites and to be, an 11-win team, it was an incredible season for the Cleveland Browns. But I think even if you ask Browns fans, like, you know what? No one's sitting there looking at that loss and going, we just squandered an opportunity. It felt like they had, had found a way with duct tape and smoke and mirrors and Joe Flacco becoming Jeremy Lin. You know what I mean? It felt like this insane run, and it just all came crashing down. And it came crashing down at the hands of a team that, credit to the Texans for help. I mean, they were flying around on defense. That Texans defense can really play. And then behind the quarterback, the young quarterback who I think is quickly becoming a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And I think it's easier said right now because some of the big name guys like a Burrow, a Herbert, we'll talk about him coming on up here in a little bit. Jalen Hurts. I mean, some of these guys just had really, really bad seasons and rough seasons, whether it's for injury or what may have you be it, the way it ended for Hurts. And CJ Stroud is playing with an extreme level of confidence right now. And you saw it throughout the game, making athletic throws, standing in the pocket, moving around, every kind of throw. He's, we credit, and we criticize, a guy like Justin Herbert a lot for sometimes like, dude, you don't have to throw a laser every single time. CJ Stroud already feels like he has a complete understanding of the touch, when it needs to be a laser, when it's just those quick lob passes, when it's just a dump off, when it's a deep ball with a ton of air and arc on it. He's like a 5-tool prospect already, and he looks like such a veteran. And the offense, and you can tell the team just feels that around him. They rally around him, and that defense balled out. I mean, we knew Joe Flacco was going to make one dumb play, right? He made multiple dumb plays, and the Texans defense feasted on it. And by midway through the second quarter, that game was over.
Yeah, I don't want to crown CJ Stroud too early, but he really does remind me in terms of the current landscape of the NFL comparisons to a Joe Burrow. I mean, because
it's apt.
Burrow pre all of these injuries and probably still is the case is more athletic than he's given credit for, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he can scramble for 10 yards and move well within the pocket. CJ Stroud's very similar. I mean, I feel like he got knocked a lot for his lack of mobility. And then he showed that one big game, in the bowl game at the end of his college career that, oh no, he's got some wheels. Yeah. And he really hasn't. I mean, I think he had like one rushing yard in this game. Like he can win where, oh, I'll scramble 40 yards, kind of like Mahomes does, or I'll just beat you apart from the pocket. He moves
Yeah.
very well within the pocket. Now, he does have a good supporting cast around him. Like, that's the one thing where we can say, Trevor Lawrence had a really
Laremy
bumpy and
Tunsil.
rocky start, to his career because he had a terrible offensive line, not much surrounding him, and obviously a fractured culture. It seems like DeMeco Ryans, it's a great pairing.
Oh, yeah.
Like CJ Stroud is getting off on the right foot, and so he has all the makings in the setup for success to get a win for Houston.
Yeah.
In this, after everything that's happened with Deshaun Watson, with the Nick Caserio and Jack Easterby, and just
Easterby,
the whole dynamics there in the front office for a long time. It seemed like Houston was on a precipitous fall, and instead they get the coach right, they get the quarterback right in one offseason, and just like that, we're looking at a complete turnover.
I would just tell Texans fans, go on this wave, ride this wave, be pumped about it, because we've seen how quickly things can turn. I mean, look at where Philly is a year ago versus now. Look at where Trevor Lawrence was a year ago versus now. Same thing with Herbert. I mean, it can
Carson
turn
Wentz, the guy was on an MVP trajectory, and it 3 years of subplay,
he's out of the league.
Par performance, and he's out of the league.
Yeah, so it is.
But yeah.
It can happen really, really quickly, but it feels to me like this is real, what we're watching with CJ Stroud. Now, they have a tough matchup. We'll talk about it, obviously on Friday's show. So, take the flowers now is a heck of a win because you got a tough matchup coming up on Saturday.
They do. They draw the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously not an exciting situation for Houston to go to. There were other potential opportunities depending on who won. If Pittsburgh won, then Houston would have drawn the Chiefs. I mean, either way, it's a tough matchup for Houston. But hey, I mean, they're playing well. They're poised. They can certainly go into Baltimore and win that game as well. So moving on to the final game on Saturday, the Dolphins at the Chiefs. I believe, what is it, the fourth or sixth coldest game in NFL history?
I think by kickoff, it was officially like the actual temp was like the fourth worst in NFL history. Yeah. But if you'd go into wind chills and all that, I don't think they have all the. I don't think they have all the data for some of those older games. But I think with the wind chill factor that we know in modern times, it's like the coldest in modern times.
Frigid situation there in Kansas City, and the Chiefs were able to. You mentioned it. It was still relatively low scoring. Maybe the Chiefs putting up 26 was a little bit surprising to have one team reach 26 points in these temperatures, but it really didn't seem to affect Kansas City very much at all. Miami struggled to get going in, any which way, especially on offense. Really, really struggled to move the ball deep down the field, which is their MO. They didn't run the ball very effectively. It was pretty much a total, shit show for the Dolphins. 7 points in the second quarter. Were completely shut out in the second half. This was all Kansas City this entire game. They win 26-7 handily. Mahomes looked great. Kelsey, a little uncharacteristic, had some drops, which it's like he's the one. The Kansas City receiving core has been drop city this whole year. Travis is the one you don't want to have the drops, but it worked out fine for them. They win by 19, advance. I don't think either of us were terribly surprised by the outcome. Maybe how it got there.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Kansas City advances, and they look pretty good. And if there's any team that can right the wrongs of a, underwhelming regular season, it's Kansas City. So this is a team we can knock down out in any shape or form.
I will say, I like I was saying on the show on Saturday, I live fairly close to Kansas City. I'm in the same temperature bracket right now. Today's high was, I think, 5-6 degrees. Like right now, the high temperature and the minus. We're still in the minus with the wind chill. Like it's bad. It's getting better. Like the next couple of days, we'll get into the 20s and kind of out of the negatives. And by this time next week, we'll be back in the 40s. I went outside during halftime of that game I bundled up, put the jacket on just to like kind of see. I don't know how. I really don't know how they did it. It's crazy. It was so insanely cold. And I will say Kansas City, they ran the ball with Pacheco 24 something times, but they still threw the ball 40 plus times with Mahomes. Like They didn't. They played a game like it was 40 degrees outside. Like they did not let the weather affect them or their play calling at all. And we said, and I was very vocal on the Saturday show, like here's the path for Miami to win. Was talking a lot about that. And I still think you saw what I was trying to get at, right? Like I think you saw like the Tyreek Hill with the big play. Like it was in there for them. But in the end, they just were a team that a lot like the Philadelphia Eagles down the stretch, it felt like this team just like the air was let out of their tires. And their offense that
didn't seem like they wanted to be there.
Yeah, and their offense that scored 70 points, earlier in the season and looked like world beaters, it just completely kind of fell apart. Now, I think Mike McDaniel's still a really good coach. I like him. I think he's right for Miami. He's right for what they're trying to build down there. I do think there's a lot of Tua questions we're going to see this offseason. He's going into the final year of his contract. They picked up the 5th-year option. Next year is his 5th year. So that's going to be a lot of discussion about Tua and Miami. So we'll save that for another date. As far as Kansas City goes, what I would feel really confident about if I was a Kansas City fan is exactly what I stated earlier. 24 carries for Pacheco. He was great. In cold weather, he's great. The offensive line was great. And you were able to throw the ball effectively and move the ball in a way that the elements didn't matter to you, it felt like, at all. And yeah, Kelsey had some drops. He's not going to play in another game that cold. It's not happening the rest of the way. And I think that was a large part of it. Rashid Rice also kept showing up like he's becoming a true number one for them. And Definitely. He had like every rookie, wide receiver record in a playoff game until Puka Nacua 24 hours later stole all those records from him. So he really is becoming a number one. Now, I think he's going to eventually be a really great number 2 wide receiver for them. But again, the fact that he's developing as a 1 to then move to a 2 eventually, I think is just great the way Kansas City has kind of set this up, his career trajectory and his growth. And then finally, to me, what really separated the Chiefs and the Dolphins in this game was the Kansas City defensive line mauled and manhandled. And they didn't let Miami run. They gave nothing to Miami easy at all. And that, with the cold weather, killed Miami's spirit. So if Kansas City's defensive line can keep playing like that, it's going to be really tough to beat Kansas City in the rest of the postseason for sure.
Yeah, the Kansas City went into this game with a swagger that is just very much like Chiefs-like. I mean, it's just how they've exuded themselves in the last 5-6 years with Mahomes at quarterback, and that didn't waver at all, despite the complete
great way to
change in how the season went for them compared to all of their previous seasons. This was the first time where they'd have, to eventually go on the road in the playoffs and all of that, and to think that they went into this game with just as much confidence, it appeared, as they've ever had in years past when they had this dynamic offense. It just speaks a lot to how much, how stable this group is. And, in the NFL, it's just about getting to the playoffs, right? And then the slate is wiped clean and you're starting anew. And what Kansas City's done this year is had these rocky moments, but they've gotten better into December. And, they're running the ball and dominating the line of scrimmage. And that's going to win you a lot of ball games, especially when you have the best quarterback in the NFL. To even put into that mix. It does very much feel like the early, Tom Brady-ish teams where they were much more physical and not as much offense, but they ran the football. Defense was stout. And they had a really, really special guy quarterback. Yeah. That's how this feels right now in those early.
Yeah, this is not the Chiefs team that lost to Brady's Bucks in the Super Bowl or beat the Niners in the Super Bowl. This is a different Chiefs team that relies more heavily on a really fun running back to watch, run the football, cartoonishly run the football, and then a defensive line that is just a bunch of monsters and dudes led by an all-pro and Chris Jones.
And I mean, it goes back to having a game plan as well. And Andy Reid is the best of the bunch to be able to come in and know what they wanted to do and execute it properly. There's something to be said for that, for sure. So the Chiefs move on. They will be taking on the Buffalo Bills on Sunday evening for Sunday Night Football on CBS. So that should be an exciting game. I know the NFL and NFL fans alike are excited about having this matchup between Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, having them to duke it out. We'll see if the Bills stadium, they're able to actually get all of the seats cleared out for the game, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But before we go to the Sunday games, we will pause for a word from one of our sponsors.
Transform your body into a canvas of exquisite storytelling and profound self-expression with the skilled hands of Ryan Allison. Craft custom masterpieces that tell your unique story together. Ryan specializes in color tattoos as well as black and gray. He also practices a diverse range of styles, whether you're passionate about anime, fantasy, mythology, pop culture, video games, movies, the esoteric, nature, creatures, dot work, black work, or you have your own ideas. Ryan embraces your distinct vision with an unwavering commitment to passion, precision, and originality. Each project he undertakes is a labor of dedication, a fusion of research, artistic ingenuity, and profound symbolism. His commitment to authenticity is nothing short of remarkable, infusing his very soul into every creation. From half and full sleeves to bodysuits, awesome back pieces, to majestic front panels, Ryan is the artist for anyone seeking powerful, breathtaking artwork. With every stroke of his needle, he weaves a tale that's as unique as you are. Don't settle for ordinary tattoos when you can elevate your ink to the extraordinary with Ryan Allison. Embark on your creative journey by booking a consultation with him and proudly exhibit your story on your skin. Visit Ryan at Why Not Ink Studio in North Park Mall or check out his portfolio online at ryanallison.art. Ryan Allison Tattoos. When you choose me, you're not just getting a tattoo, you're getting an experience.
All right, welcome back. You are listening to the Football Lounge with Mark and Dan, brought to you by the For Frequency's Sake Podcast Network.
Tasting the Football Lounge, whatever you may be doing.
Exactly, whatever. However you wish to partake. We no judgment here.
Yeah.
But we're excited that you're here with us. Thank you for all the support all season long, everybody. And just as a reminder to please like and subscribe. That it does the most help for us as a show to help put us out there and get our name out there in the algorithm as much as possible. So that is greatly appreciated. And as always, we're available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube and anywhere on social media at FB Lounge Pod. So as we get into this Sunday segment of games, Mark, we're looking at two historic franchises in the Green Bay Packers and the Dallas Cowboys at Jerry's World. Cowboys go 12-5. A fantastic regular season. That's 3 straight years under Mike McCarthy that this team has put up 12 wins. Hard to imagine that amount of success has not come with a playoff victory. And yet again, they come up short. The Green Bay Packers, Jordan Love, pretty much dominate in every facet of the game. 48-32. I'm not even sure that final score really does it justice, just how dominant
it doesn't.
Of an effort that this was from Green Bay. And I'm not sure what I'm more impressed with, whether it's Jordan Love's, ability to improve throughout the year to the point where we're talking about him being one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL at this point, whether it's Aaron Jones, resurrecting his season late in the year, after he battled some injuries. But the biggest takeaway for me is that I still think that we don't talk nearly enough about Matt LaFleur and what he's been able to do with the Green Bay Packers. We've talked about the shortcomings with Aaron Rodgers and how, underwhelming those years have been because they should have gotten to the Super Bowl several times. But he took this team to 4 straight NFC championship games, and here we are once again with, the most adversity he's had to face as a head coach, perhaps. And he's come along bringing for all intents and purposes, a rookie quarterback, his first year as a starter, to the point where they're winning a playoff game on the road against Dallas and advancing to the divisional round. It's impressive stuff, and I think LaFleur deserves the majority of the credit for what he's been able to do with this team.
Yeah, I think what LaFleur should get a ton of credit for is also the development of the young core, right? This is the youngest team to ever make the playoffs, and you can't say there's anyone's fingerprints on this. There's no Mike McCarthy fingerprints on this team. Their only fingerprints on this team are LaFleur and Gutekunst, and I think that's really a special thing for Matt LaFleur. And when you look at what the Packers went through this season, there were times when we rightfully so were writing them off. And then we were on this show talking about, oh my God, man, the Packers just beat the Chiefs. And now they have a couple winnable games and they might be an 11-win team. What ends up happening is two really ugly losses, including one to the Giants. And you start looking around going, man, this team, they gave up, 20-something points to the Panthers. They almost lost that game. It's really getting ugly, and you start.
They were hard to read, hard team.
Yeah, it was just that. It feels like that college football team that just needed time to continue to mature and gel, and they had some real injuries during the middle of that part of that season, that run. And you're right, Aaron Jones is healthy now, and he is running like a madman. It is extremely impressive, and Jordan Love played a heck of a football game. Now, I think a lot of it was Love just, kind of saying, screw it. You could just see it in his confidence, the way his arm angle, some of those throws he makes were like, yeah, LaFleur is scheming this game well, but he's making the throws and he's making these decisions to ball out the way he did. You got to give him a lot of credit. Now, again, I don't know what this means long-term for Jordan Love. Just like we talked about with CJ Stroud, we have now this weird scenario where it's like 3 years ago we were talking about Deshaun Watson as like, oh my God, he went toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, and now it's like the guy can't play. We last year how much we're raving about Trevor Lawrence, and this year's just been a disaster. So I will say this to Packers fans, they have a lot to be excited for. Absolutely. That was a heck of a win. It was a dominating win. Their coaching staff dominated the Dallas Cowboys coaching staff, because they're not as talented as Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys had 9 All-Pros. Now, I think that was a little overblown when you look at it overall.
But the Dallas Cowboys, yeah.
But even if you take 2 or 3 of those away, that's still a lot more All-Pros than the Packers had, right? And so Micah Parsons was a no-show in this game. As great as the scheming was from the Packers and the play of their young quarterback and their young wide receiver core, who you can just tell they're all playing free. Like, they all like each other. There's great energy in that locker room. And then the other side, as soon as Dak made a mistake, everyone's sphincters tightened. You know what I mean? You could just feel it. You could see it. You could look in Dak's eyes. I mean, and we all, as a crowd watching, knew exactly where this was going.
They felt the pressure, and they crumbled. We had said it.
We're like, Green Bay's biggest hope is that all the pressure is on Dallas, and it worked. It came out, and Dallas absolutely shit the bed. Dallas is a talented football team. Dallas has a lot of great players. They were outcoached, and their star players, their biggest star players, Dak Prescott and Micah Parsons, were no-shows in the biggest game of their season. And in a game where it was really important for Dak and his agent, we talked about it on Saturday, like, this is a negotiation game, is not great. It's not great. He's got one more deal this year. He's got his cap hit next year. Is final year of the country.
59.
Yeah, it's right? $60 million, $59.5 million. And he's got a no trade clause, and he's got a no tag clause. So this next year,
he might end up actually making more money in his career than Deshaun Watson, and who got a $230 million guaranteed.
Yeah,
contract.
because he will get a contract somewhere, whether it's in Dallas or somewhere else.
He's Kirk Cousins in terms of that, super smart in terms of just getting those contracts and getting that money for sure.
So as much credit as I give Green Bay, and they deserve a lot of credit. They came out like a team that played with. They have nothing to lose. They threw everything, and they didn't hide anything. It's not like Green Bay was like, oh, we can't reveal this. They threw everything at the Cowboys. It felt like the Cowboys were disjointed, unorganized, unprepared, and then got really, really tight really, really quickly. And their offseason is going to be fascinating. I fully expect Nick Sirianni to be fired. I don't expect Mike McCarthy to be fired. I just don't think Jerry works that way anymore. He's not a young man, and it's a lot of work. But I think if Bill Belichick were to call either of those two places and say, I want that job, if he called Jerry Jones or he called Howie Roseman, Bill Belichick saying, I want that job, he would get that job. So I don't know if Mike McCarthy's fired. I feel like Sirianni should be fired. Mike McCarthy got a lot out of Dak Prescott this year, 12 win seasons, 3 in a row. He's done a lot of good there. It just hasn't translated to playoff wins. But at this point in time, I feel like Dallas is. They're not like Kansas City. They're not like the Patriots. Like they're it doesn't feel like they feel a lot more like the Steelers, where they're just like, okay, great.
Yeah.
See you next year. Yep. Winning season, sell a lot of merch. Jerry's World, come take your pictures. It doesn't feel as though there is a devastating, utter, the world is on fire because we won and done in the playoffs again. It just doesn't feel that way at all.
No, and on top of that, I do agree that if there's a coach that Jerry feels he can get, then maybe he'll make the move, but only until he gets an assurance or is, 99%
a Harbaugh, a Belichick,
confident.
A big name that he feels confident in.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's also hard to fire your head coach that's won 36 games in 3 years. I mean, it's a hard selling point to be like, well, we've gotten there and just, but there's something, you have to have playoff success in the NFL. And yeah, you mentioned it. There's two sides to that coin with Jerry because he's not getting any younger. Maybe he's starting to lose patience. Like, I need to get another championship here in Dallas before my time is done as owner of the Dallas Cowboys. And so there's probably a little bit more pressure there. You saw his press conference after the game where he talked about how this was the most devastating loss because of the expectations. I don't know about that. I would think the NFC Championship game where Dez Bryant caught it, but it wasn't counted. I would think that's a little more devastating than
he's living in the
first
moment
round. But nonetheless, I get where he's coming from. And for Dallas, I'm not a fan of the Dallas Cowboys. Not a fan really of the Dallas Cowboy fan base as a whole. But you got to feel for them too, because they've been fans of this team for decades upon decades, and they're just not producing in the postseason at all.
I think the Texans have more wins as a franchise in the postseason since they've been around than the Dallas Cowboys, like in the last 22 years since 2002.
That's incredible.
I will say this is my kind of final point on it that I wanted to make, and I think it's the right time to talk about this. If you have thoughts on it, I'd love to hear it. Nick Wright on First Things First, he said it on Colin Cowherd's show today. I always love listening to Nick and Colin talk together on Tuesdays. They always talk great. Tuesdays just because I think they bring out the best in each other. It's a really good time to listen to those two. And Nick Wright brought up a great point. It's a really great point. And it's a point that I wish every NFL GM would hear loud and clearly, and every fan base to understand it. He said every single quarterback, we've seen the greatest of all time, Brady. We've seen the greatest talent of all time, Rodgers and Mahomes. We've seen good system quarterbacks, Trent Dilfer. We, under-talented but really heavy emotionally guys like a Jim McMahon with a great defense lead teams to Super Bowl wins. We've seen almost every type of quarterback win a Super Bowl except for the average quarterback who's anywhere between 11th and 18th who's overpaid. They've never won a Super Bowl. The average quarterback who's overpaid has never won a Super Bowl. And it's more of a modern problem, right? Because these giant contracts have only really started showing up in the last 20 years in the NFL, especially for quarterbacks. And so it's so true. It's just such a true point. And it is the problem now that the Miami Dolphins will face, that eventually I think that the San Francisco 49ers will face with Brock Purdy. It is the biggest mistake that the Cleveland Browns made and Baker Mayfield himself made. They could have found a way to come to a deal. He had like 120 guaranteed on the table from them, and he wanted more, and so they just completely blew it up. Instead of just going to like 150 and finding a really good middle ground or adding another year or something, you can win. I think you can win a Super Bowl with an average quarterback. The Niners may win, and they almost won with Jimmy G, with an average quarterback around 12th in the league, playing good football, surrounded by an incredible cast that you're only paying, somewhere between $20 and $30 million a year. As soon as you get north of 35 and your quarterback is not in the top 10, you're absolutely screwed. It is an absolute guarantee. You will win regular season games. You will not win a Super Bowl. It's a guarantee as of right now. It's hit 100 out of 100 times. That's the situation Dallas finds himself in. The new situation we're finding too, though, is these mega talented guys who've been mega paid, Herbert, Hurts, Burrow, who don't have a ring. Allen, where do they fit into this now, right? You feel just comfortable still paying those guys because in the end you feel like they have still the Lamar. They have still the upside that can just will their team to a Super Bowl. But even that is something we have only seen with Patrick Mahomes, where the mega talent with the mega contract win a Super Bowl. So it's a unique situation to be in. And it's one of those things why I feel in my fandom, in my team, the Bears are in a good spot. If you go to rookie, you restart the pay scale. And if you don't go with a rookie, Justin Fields hasn't done anything yet to prove that he's worth $40 million. Yeah, you might be able to get him for $28 million a year, $29 million a year, $30 million a year, which if that, then your team, you can build a lot of talent around your quarterback if you're only paying him $30 million a year, not 45 for North.
I think it's a very interesting conversation topic because, I was looking up because I thought, well, wasn't Joe Flacco making quite a bit of money? But
he didn't get the money till after.
He didn't. Yeah, it was.
He went on the run.
Where he got
it was a contract year for him, and he went on the run. And it's the same thing. If Dak would have went on this run, Dak would have got himself another $300 million, and he still might because Jerry's crazy, but he could have got himself a gigantic bite at the apple. And there are guys now still in this playoffs, so we'll talk about on Friday's show, that have a chance still, like the money's out there. Go get it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're entering a different era of conversation when it comes to quarterbacks as well. That's why this is going to be very interesting to see how we're talking about this in 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Because, on top of the difference in high paid quarterbacks and how that's ballooned over the years, and especially in the last 10 or so, we're also talking about more quality quarterbacks coming into the NFL. I mean, it's funny because when we look back on the heyday of our, childhood viewing, it was basically, for the most part, Brady, Peyton, Ben, Breeze, and Aaron, right? And then, if you want to throw Favre in there a little bit earlier, sure, it's like 6 quarterbacks or so. A kid growing up like at 10 years old right now, when he's 30, is going to be like, yeah, dude, remember that era of Burrow, Herbert, Trevor, CJ, Lamar, and they're just like just rattling them off. There's going to be 20 good quarterbacks in the league. Starting next year. It's wild. It's a wild time in the NFL for sure.
Dak is, to me,
more pressure.
Yeah,
there's more pressure on the Steelers, Washington, the Giants.
Yeah,
everyone's getting a quarterback, man. Like Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant, and he's leading a team, to a first round bye. You gotta find a quarterback or else you're doomed. It's over.
Well, and again, a lot of it starts with the organization and your head coach. Like, it works in San Francisco. Brock Purdy works in San Francisco. Tua, for the most part, works with Mike McDaniel because of the way they coach. They want to build their team. Greg Olson said it. He tweeted out, and I retweeted it as well. He's like, unless you're running the Shanahan offense, you're failing your quarterback if you're just putting him in shotgun with 4 wide, 5 wide every play. It is you're asking them to do something that only 2 or 3 guys in the NFL can do. Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes. Like, that's it. Like, those are the guys who can consistently shotgun 5 wide. Let me pick them apart. Let me be the greatest player on that. Like, that's it. So even the really talented other guys, like obviously Lamar works within a really unique system for himself. And he's now surrounded by some really good wide receiver talent. It is a fascinating conversation. And Nick Wright brought that point up to, and I was like, when we talk about Dallas, we have to bring it up because to me, Dallas is the epitome of it. You can win a bunch of regular season games. You can put up a bunch of stats. Second team All-Pro for Dak, great. But when push comes to shove, he starts pooping the bed, and your other stars don't show up. And now you got to pay. You got to pay Micah Parsons. You got to pay CeeDee Lamb. You're in absolute cap hell. I mean, you're in cap hell with a coach who doesn't seem to be able to elevate in the big moments either.
The Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
32 years in the making.
You doubted them.
I was very happy to be wrong in that situation. A 1-point victory at that. So don't tell me you weren't sweating a little bit there late in the game.
I was at the end.
But no, I mean, hey, props to Detroit. What a win 24-23. It was almost kismet that it worked out that they won, by a point, barely edging. Like,
I mean, I had
fighting,
the over.
clawing.
I would have loved another touchdown in there, but
Yeah.
it's okay.
For sure. Well, Dan Campbell, what he's been able to do, the rough, you think about 0-16 for all those years ago, but even when Dan Campbell took over, they were 0-10-1 at one point before they got their first victory. What was that, 2020, I believe, or 2021?
2021 with Jared Goff, they ended up 13-1.
Yep. And then to go from that 2 years later to hosting themselves a game, winning their first playoff game in 30 years and advancing, and getting another home game here coming up this weekend. Incredible stuff. Props to them. Obviously, this was a game dictated a lot by, mitigating mistakes and just kind of staying the course. I mean, Matthew Stafford played well as a quarterback from that position here. Puka Nacua, you already mentioned him, setting rookie records. What a quality find he was in the draft, and he had almost 200 yards receiving in this game. Both teams fought and battled hard. Detroit had that lead early on. Rams started to come back, but then Detroit, holds them off there in the second half. It was a full team effort from both teams. It's just the Lions, came out on top with a 1-point win, and you could feel the energy exuding from Jared Goff, from Dan Campbell, the team, the speech after the game, the stadium. I mean, it was electric. It was awesome, really cool. The only, issue when these types of things happen is you want to make sure that they haven't used up all of the juice,
emotional
and all the
energy,
right? All poured that all into winning one game. Of course, they all talked about it afterwards. They have more to do. They have further goals to attain. So hopefully they can still channel all of this and continue on this ride, because it's a talented team, and I can't believe Sam Laporta played. What a warrior. And they'll get a little bit more rest and have him back even more healthy next week. But Lions get the win. Rams sent home, and we'll see what's in store next week for Detroit as they get ready to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But your thoughts on the Detroit Lions? You've been singing their praises all year long.
I'll start with the Rams just really quickly, wanting to say I think they're going to be a team that if they have a good offseason where they have a bunch of draft picks, you can keep adding youth to this really young team. And if they sign one or two key veteran free agents and get Aaron Donald to come back for another year, this team's going to be a force to be reckoned with next year. Like, you could see how much better this team got towards the end of the year. These young players, a lot like Green Bay's young players, just really developing. And again, McVay, the coaching. You can see the coaching. You can see the improvement. The Rams are my big sleeper for 2020 for next year, especially just depending on how their offseason goes. So kudos to them. Heck of a year for them in what truly was, for them and Green Bay, rebuilding years. These were rebuilding years, and they made the playoffs and both put on really good performances in the playoffs. The Rams, they were just a little short. Like the Rams, the problem was they just are a couple veteran defensive and offensive linemen away from being able to match the physicality of that Detroit team. They just did not have the men and the physical, like the bodies and the attitudes that Detroit team had. That Detroit team is special. I cannot wait to watch them play football again. I'm so excited for that Bucs versus Lions game. I think Ford Field's going to be electric, like it was. I think you can tell this Lions team, like, you're right. Did they use it all? You saw how much emotion there was this end. These fans are pumped. They're like ready. I think they're just be tailgate starting Friday night. And Dan Campbell's the type of coach that can fight through that, right? I'll say this. What I was really impressed by the Lions overall was when we were talking about the Detroit Lions after the draft and our draft recap show, one of the biggest question marks was, oh my God, Jahmyr Gibbs, the second best running back. You took him first overall. They paid David Montgomery. Did they really need to spend $20 million 2 years on David Montgomery? They let go of Hutchinson, of the tight end. Why can't I think of his name? They send him to Minnesota, Hawkinson. Yeah. And you're like, oh God, man, Detroit, like, I really liked what they were doing, but this offseason, this trade is just weird. Look at like their GM, the way he's built this roster and this team. they're not going to be able to compete with every single buddy, because if they're playing Miami in Miami next September, these are a bunch of big uglies and physical team that probably would lose that game. But in January and December football, and I know they don't really have to go outdoors again. They might have to go to San Francisco next, in the NFC Championship game. This team is built for this type of football, and they're indoor cats, like the speed of Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams. They're in a dome this week against Tampa Bay. They'd be outside against San Francisco in probably decent weather, and then they'd be playing inside in Vegas in a Super Bowl. Like, don't kid yourself. This Lions team is the sky's the limit for them right now, and they are on an emotional roller coaster, feel like a team of destiny. I don't know if the Lions are building a 5-year dynasty, but they've built a team in this window right now over the last couple of years of 3-13-1 to just barely missing the playoffs last year to this year, and they keep adding physicality. They keep adding players that fit the Dan Campbell mentality, and it's really, really paying off, and you saw it in that Rams game. And I said it, I tweeted it out, and I had a listener of ours kind of combat me because I was like, it's a cakewalk for the Lions to the Super Bowl now. Like, what? Are you dumb? Like, a cakewalk against the Niners? I'm like, you don't understand what I'm saying. Like, what I talked about on Saturday's show. Emotionally now, this is a cakewalk for them. They've popped the pimple, right? Like, the cyst has been Dr. Pimple Popper. She got it out. Like, it's gone. The weight of that is done for the Detroit Lions. They won a game at home against Stafford. Everything else now is going to feel so much easier for them. So much easier for them emotionally. They can just go in there and just be like, we're a big, bad physical football team. Love the scenes in Detroit, listening to Ford Field. It was the loudest atmosphere of the weekend. Hell of a game. It was my favorite game of the weekend. It was terrific. It was the best game of the weekend. And so happy for the Lions fans. Now, I say all this knowing that I really, really, really want my team to look like the Detroit Lions. I really wish my head coach was Dan Campbell. I think he should have a job for life in Detroit. I think just build the statue of him already, even if he doesn't win another game. And what he's done for this franchise and that organization, it's been special. And Jared Goff is the right quarterback for it. I laugh because I'm like, obviously, if Matt Stafford was with Dan Campbell and this team, I would think they're even more of a dangerous team because Stafford is a top 7 quarterback in this league. He's so good. He's so good when healthy. But they're also running an offense that fits extremely well for what Jared Goff does. And he's kicking ass in the offense. He really is. The play action stuff, hitting receivers in time. I'm all hyped up for the Lions. I'm hyped for the Lions.
For as physical as they are defensively and offensively too, but they've got some skill dudes that are flashy and burners, So they really match that well. They combine the physicality, that type of approach from their head coach. But pairing it with, but we can still get a 60-yard deep bomb to Jameson Williams, or Jahmyr Gibbs can, take one cut and he's off to the races. I mean, they've got a lot of special playmakers on this team too, and that's why. And they're all young. It just goes to show. And Jared Goff's not old. Like, I mean, Jared Goff is. Probably 29 would be
trying to get 30. He might have just turned 30. He was first overall pick in 2016, so he's not even been in the league 10 years. So. For people like they need to find Goff's replacement, no. Like this is Goff is riding it out with this group, whatever this group looks like. It feels like he's earned that right. He brought Detroit their first win in 30 years. I will just say, as a fan, I'm happy for Lions fans because they've had to fight and defend their fandom for decades, right? And. Sure. It's paying off in oodles. And they have a head coach and a GM who get it, who are on the same page, who are making, they were celebrating that Jahmyr Gibbs pick and people were mocking them online. Like, what are these idiots doing? You just paid a running back and look at what's happening. He's a gigantic weapon for them, a weapon that so many other teams wish they had right now. And would be so much better if they had a weapon like that.
David Montgomery
It's a-
perfectly. I mean,
they've
it's
built
a great marriage.
with that offensive line. They've just built such a solid football team.
Absolutely. So they're moving on to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Sunday. The Steelers fall to the Bills 31-17.
You were on the
In a
ride.
game that-
Emotional tweeting roller coaster.
Oh, dude, I was, I had a few glasses of wine, so the emotions were flowing, and it was a tweet storm for sure. And obviously, I was, it was an emotional roller coaster of a season with the Pittsburgh Steelers, no question. And I was just happy that they were in the playoffs, and was half expecting them, to be ousted in the first round. But all of that being said, I still don't think it serves as an excuse for having yet another year of not having a playoff win. It's every team has excuses. Yeah, the Steelers may have been probably more injury riddled than most teams, most
Them and the
years
Browns.
in the playoffs, but yeah, exactly. And so, but that's the thing is, people deal with those types of adversity every year, and are able to put together one playoff win in 7 years, and Pittsburgh hasn't been able to do it. So that was certainly frustrating. The thing that made me the most mad, and one that's going to take me some time to get over still, and it usually doesn't boil down to one play, especially in the first half, but in this case it does. To me, they had second and goal.
Yeah.
They were within, they could have gotten into within one score, and they go empty set on second and goal from like the 4 and throw a pick. And that, and right then I was like, that's game. Like that's, you barely have gotten into this area. You have to take anything that you can get, and the Pittsburgh Steelers squandered it. And once again, I mean, is that on play calling? Yes. But ultimately, I don't know if Tomlin said, hey, we need to pass the ball on this down. I don't know if he floated that, or maybe he just gave it to the offensive coordinator and said, but figure it out. But that is at the feet of Tomlin. That, you get into the red area, Tomlin's got to be the guy saying, we're running the football here now. We're at the 8-yard line. We're running it first, second, third down, and depending on what it is on fourth down, we may run it a fourth time to try and get there. But instead, they go empty and throw it. It was a bad throw too, but nonetheless, just really
and a bad play design down there. I mean, those quick out routes in that tight area, it's all the leverages to the defense. Like the field.
Well, Mason needed to throw it out of bounds essentially to where Deontay Johnson could maybe reach out of bounds and get it, but he threw it inside, and that's.
But you have your big tight end. There's just other play. If you're going to throw it, to me, there's other ways to go. I tweeted that. I would think that was my tweet. Was just like to you. It's like that was it. That was just such bonkers. It was a dagger. It was really a dagger. Can I'll say I want to hear more from you. So I'll just quickly say, for the Bills, a really nice win. Because especially when Pittsburgh climbed back in that game, and all of a sudden you're like, crap, this is a 2-score game. Like, and then I think it was a 1-score game for a while. Like,
it was 24-17 at one point, but then they instantly went back and made it 2 possessions again.
And Josh Allen put the cape on, and it showed you again why he is one of those 3 or 4 guys in the league that can do things that no one else can do. And they have their own styles. I mean, he really is built for moments like that and built for playoff games. And he is one of those guys that your franchise would kill to have. And so I think Buffalo, you could also tell they're just playing with it. It feels like the weight has been lifted off of their shoulders. There's no pressure that people picked us. We have to do that. Like, it just feels different for Buffalo right now. And the running game feels different. So there's a lot to be like if you're Buffalo. And obviously we're going to talk a ton about that game Saturday on Sunday on our show on Friday. So I don't want to start previewing it yet. I'll ask you this about the Steelers. We'll go back to the Steelers. We just had the big discussion about middle-of-the-line quarterbacks and how you have to build around guys who you feel like are average talent. This offseason starts, to me, with Mike Tomlin walking off stage, not giving the reporter to even a chance to finish the question, asking about Mike Tomlin's got 1 year left on your contract, out.
Bad luck. Bad luck.
Where are you at? Like, to you as a diehard fan, but also as someone who tries to analyze the game. I mean, so much is on me as like I'm in that same boat for what do I want to do with my team, right? Number 1 pick and all that. For you, what would be a home run off season for this team? Like, I not only want this to happen, I feel like this needs to happen. What is the quick elevator pitch on a home run off season for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Well, there's the more realistic route that I could go, and then there's the less realistic route, which ideally for me, it's not going to happen. So I don't like to put it out there too much and give it, this credence that it doesn't deserve. But I would give up multiple first round picks to move up and get a quarterback. I mean, that's what I would do. It's one of the better quarterback classes we've seen in recent years. I think you have the ability to barter, and you have assets on your team that you could part with. Personally, I don't think they should give up TJ Watt. I don't think that's some guy I'd be willing to give up in a deal. But just, in general, I mean, you've got some players. If it takes a George Pickens plus a first and, a future second as well to move up and then, do it. They need to get a quarterback in there that can win, because it's TJ Watt is 30 years old. And for an edge rusher, like, I don't know how many years he has left in him. Cam Hayward probably will be back next year for what I would assume is his final year.
Swan song year.
I mean, your expensive defense. By the way, let me just put this out there real quick too. The defense that they spent so much money on, that Tomlin has been a proponent of. He's the defensive-minded head coach, the guy who runs the show and is built on defense winning championships. They've lost 5 playoff games in a row. And can you guess what the average opponent score that they've given up in those 5 games? The average.
Well, you set it up in a way that makes me feel like it's got to be over 30 points.
It's over 40.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
In 5 games, the average is over 40. And then I forget, I think it was up on First Take. I think Stephen A. Smith posted the graphic of this. Their average points, or not even just average, their points down in the last 5 playoff games before they score was 21, 28, 35, and 21.
So they were in giant holes.
Down 21, 28, or 35-0 in their last 4 playoff games. And that's not serious.
But can I argue in defense of Tomlin? Can I argue in defense of Tomlin? He doesn't have an offense that can control the clock, and score. And so it is tough. I also think
but a lot of teams have had lesser than offenses that have stumbled in playoffs and they've won games. But look, I didn't want to derail it too much. Like, my ideal offseason would be they trade up and get a quarterback, right?
Yeah.
And then make a splash OC hire. But the more realistic route is you make a splash OC hire and you hire like 4 more assistant coaches, because they have 8 coaches on their staff. Like, it's the small staff by a large margin in the NFL. And I truly think that's a big problem. I think it's a huge problem.
I agree. You can have too many cooks in the kitchen. You can also have way too little. And the problem is when you have that little amount of people is that different coach. Think back to when I stopped playing in high school. You stopped playing in high school, but there's always different voices that resonate with you as a player, right?
Yeah,
that you can connect to say, I don't really get what the message is coming from the head guy or maybe the main assistant, but this quality control person or this assistant, defensive line guy, he really makes it make sense for me. And I can find my way in, or whatever it might be. I will say, I think Pittsburgh is going to be one of the most interesting off seasons have one of the most interesting off seasons of the off season, because they are a win now team. I mean, there's so much talent on that roster, and it just feels so much like you're looking up once again at Burrow, at Lamar, and now in the AFC with CJ Stroud. And I mean, it's so many dudes, and you just don't feel like like we've said before.
And I don't know how they address it elsewhere, because Kirk Cousins gets floated, but I mean, but again, yes, he would improve the team, but does that move the needle enough?
It might move it enough to you win a game. You might win a playoff game. But again, I think the problem with Pittsburgh right now is that if you have a defensive head coach like the Chicago Bears, we're in the same boat. If you have a defensive head coach, you need a transcendent quarterback talent, or else you're screwed. Because if you're a defensive head coach, when's the last time we had a defensive head coach who had an average quarterback, but they ran a terrific offense? Like, I can't even think of it. Like, Mike Tomlin,
maybe you could say the 2012 Ravens, because,
but again, that's over a decade ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they weren't like amazing offensively. They were just
no.
lightning in a bottle.
It's over a decade ago, and it's just a different NFL. It's tough. And Pittsburgh finds himself in a situation where I said it to you earlier. I've said it on the show. Like, I agree with you. I think Pittsburgh is one of the prime candidates that should absolutely kick the tires on what would it take. They don't need Drake May. They need a Caleb Williams or a Jaden Daniels. They need a dude who can look across the field with Lamar Jackson and go, here's our ace to your ace. Like, this is our dude who's going to battle your dude, and then we both have great defenses, and may the best man win. Like, that is what this Pittsburgh Steelers team needs. And then, Cincinnati's built a little different, and Joe Burrow's a different type of cat, but that's what you need. Like, and I agree with you. I don't think Pittsburgh will do it, but I think they absolutely need to.
24 career starts for Kenny Pickett, 13 touchdowns. That's insane. That sounds so crazy.
That's bad. That's not good. That's not good. I got to be honest.
Will Levis had 4 touchdowns in his first game. In his first game as quarterback.
Yeah, that's not good.
It's not good. But yeah, I hate to make that conversation almost entirely about Pittsburgh when Buffalo.
No, but we're going to talk a ton about Buffalo on Friday, and we both know. Like, listen,
it was Buffalo, Josh Allen. That's the story.
He really, when he wants to be, and that run game, they can run the ball, and it's going to be really,
and no
really,
turnover. That's Josh Allen protecting the ball the way he did was the biggest advantage that Buffalo had in this game was Josh Allen saying, "I'm not going to be risky. I'm going to take everything they give me because we can easily."
And he plays loose. They're playing with the weight. It feels like they're playing with no weight, and it's just a different vibe.
Yeah, it's definitely a different vibe. All right, we'll get to the final game. The Buccaneers absolutely rout the Philadelphia Eagles 32-9. We mentioned Nick Sirianni potentially being on the hot seat. His job is still intact.
Should be
3:08 p.m. Eastern time, but it's a crazy downfall for the Philadelphia Eagles in this 2023-2024 NFL season, in which they were 10-1 at one point and finished the year dropping 6 of 7. Incredible. And a 3-game losing streak, with this one obviously being the worst because it was in the postseason, ending their season. Jason Kelce, it was announced this morning that he told his teammates that he will be retiring. So they're going to lose their several-time All-Pro center, potential future Hall of Famer, and possibly losing some other guys to free agency and or retirement this upcoming year as well. So a lot is in motion for the Philadelphia Eagles. Meanwhile, Baker Mayfield and the down and outs, if you will, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who basically everyone said after Tom Brady left, all right, well, that was fun while it lasted. They're going to have to strip it down to the studs and start all over again.
Yeah.
Well, the remnants of that Tom Brady team still remained, and they fought, and they get to fight on for another day with their cowboy gunslinging quarterback in Baker Mayfield leading the way. Impressive performance from the Tampa Bay Bucs against this, really down and out Eagles team. But the fact that you took advantage and, put the foot on the throat, as they say, to Philadelphia when you could have easily, gotten tight and a little nervous. Tampa Bay didn't. They aired it out. Baker Mayfield 3 touchdowns, and they send the Eagles home packing. Impressive win.
They played with so much swagger and confidence at home. Yeah. But I don't know what to really make of it, because Philadelphia from the opening drive looked and felt like a team that was poisoned, that they hated each other. They were so incohesive. There was nothing that gave you good vibes about them from the start. And you could just feel them on the sideline. I mean, Dallas Goedert started yelling at Jalen Hurts. It just was, if Tampa Bay's receivers and running backs didn't drop like an insane amount of balls in the first half, that game would have been just as ugly, if not worse, score-wise than the Cowboys-Packers game. Like, I mean, it had all-time ugliness written all over it. Mike Evans dropped a sure touchdown. Rashad White dropped a couple balls. Otten, the tight end, dropped a sure big gainer to put him in a scoring position. It was dominance from a Tampa team, but it was definitely felt like they were a team that was taking advantage of a team that did not want to be there. I mean, it just felt like a Week 18 game where Tampa was win and get in, and the Eagles, their season was already determined, right? Like that
Sure.
is the energy from the sidelines and the look and everything. It's like, oh, it's just win and get in for Tampa. They have to win this game. And for the Eagles, it felt like, oh, they already made plans. Like they already know what's going on. They're just here because they have to be here. And that is a complete indictment on the head coach. I mean, I'm not one who loves to call for people's jobs. And if Nick Sirianni had won the Super Bowl last year, this season, the way it fell apart would have been forgivable. You say, all right, the dude hired some of the wrong coordinators. Things got a little ugly, but you give him another year, give him a chance to right the wrong, get Matt Patricia out of there. He's a cancer. And really get some guys healthy, work on the back end of that defense. They're going to be okay. But because they lost that Super Bowl, and the way Sirianni, his opening press conference went, which we remember, you and I talked about, us both being not Sirianni fans, seemed like a weird hire. Press conference went bad, but then he turned things around so quickly. For things to have also now dropped off so quickly, it's easy for me to say this dude is not built for the long-term success. Last year, he was being propped up by some great coordinators in Gannon and Steichen, and a lot of talent that was in their prime and gelling at the right time. And it feels now like there's resentment against Jalen Hurts in that locker room. I don't know what it is. It's just, I'm really glad Kelsey retired because he gets to go out with some dignity left. He gets to play with his kids. He could probably play another year, but like his body, you could tell it's like, don't risk another major injury. You don't want to be a part of this rebuild. And the other reason I'm glad Kelsey retired is he has one of the biggest podcasts on the planet.
Oh, yeah.
And I have a feeling he's going to start spilling some tea on just how ugly and why it got so ugly in the coming weeks. And we're going to get some answers to it. I don't know. This is one of the biggest anomalies ever, and we need answers to what happened.
Oh, yeah. Something happened, right?
Something had to happen in the locker room. Like something had to happen. Maybe it was when they got rid of and they made the change from Desai to Matt Patricia. The defense really then quit on them. They're like, no, it's not his fault, and you're blaming the wrong guy. I don't know what it is, but there was a quit in that team, a real, genuine quit. And we need to know. We need to figure out what exactly went wrong and what happened, because I can't speculate it. They have a lot of talent. They're a talented roster. I still like Jalen Hurts a ton. He still made some throws and plays last night. Like, dude, that kid it's not his fault. Like, maybe he needs to be a better leader right now. There needs to be a little more rah-rah. There needs to be something. But he's a guy that you want to be your starting quarterback. You don't need to go find a new quarterback. Smith is a stud. You have weapons. The offensive line might need some remaking here now. It just was ugly, Dan. It was ugly. And for Tampa, like I said, I want to give them credit. They have a lot of veterans who played in big games. A lot of these guys won a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Like, they know what it's like to be in these big moments. Todd Bowles was a defensive coordinator for a Super Bowl winning team and has transitioned well into taking over last year into this year, 2 playoff runs, and what he's done with Baker Mayfield and keeping the energy of this team alive and not losing the locker room when there were some really low points. A ton of credit. He's proved me wrong in a lot of ways. But I also think to myself, they were playing against like a sick kid, it felt like. You know what I mean? It felt like a Make-A-Wish thing where it's like, I don't, do I dunk on him? I mean, he's not fighting back. Like, why is he not fighting back? And they just took advantage of it.
They did. I will say this about Sirianni, because I largely agree that, his his job needs to at least very much be in question, if not, on his way out. For all the crap we say about his staff and all of that, this is also the guy that hired Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, who a year later had coaching jobs. So like you got to give Sirianni some credit for knowing and finding two very talented coordinators the first time around. So who's to say he couldn't do it again? But thinking about that, I want to run this by you because it's something that I've been thinking about the last 2 days or so. So not entirely fully formed, but something I've certainly been thinking about is obviously hiring coordinators is an extremely valuable asset and skill to have as a head coach in the NFL.
Totally.
To be most successful head coaches have a successful staff around them, and that's why most great head coaches have successful trees. Bill Belichick, not so much. Mike Tomlin, not so much. There's a couple others that really don't, but most have really good coaching.
Bill
trees.
Walsh, Andy Reid. You got a lot of great trees out there. Bill Parcells.
And the thing I'm thinking about is, really the longer tenured a head coach is at his respective place. I think Andy Reid's the only outlier in this example. The longer that they are at their place, the less likely they're able to get good, fresh talent. And not just because they're stuck in their ways. I think it's because all of these young coaches that we see coming up, okay, Nick Sirianni gets hired. He's young, comes to Philadelphia. How does he discover a Shane Steichen and a Jonathan Gannon? Well, they work together. And it's these guys coming from place to place to place, experiencing new people, being able to compare how this person worked well there, this person worked well here. I know them. We had a good relationship because we were like roughly the same age.
But if you're in the same spot, you're surrounded by a lot of the same people.
But like, if you're Mike Tomlin, you haven't been anywhere but Pittsburgh for 17 years. How well does Mike Tomlin know a Shane Steichen when he was working with the Chargers? How does Mike Tomlin know that guy? He doesn't. How does he know who Mike Tomlin knows is probably a Frank Reich, or like these guys that have been around the league forever, Bill O'Brien, you know? So these are coordinators that could do the job well, and maybe they're all right. Or,
it's an interesting
Pete
point.
Carroll. How does Pete Carroll find someone from the Washington staff that he's like, oh, that's the next great offensive coordinator. Let me get him on my staff. You just don't find those gems unless they're in house.
Yeah, and you could be watching footage, and you could try to figure it out that way, right? To say,
but you only know how much influence someone has on something,
and then you make phone calls, and guys are always vouching for their guys, so you can't believe everything you say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you have to have that personal relationship I'll
make this argument: there are some veteran coaches, like Andy Reid, as long as he's been in Kansas City, it's been a lot of Matt Nagy and Eric Bieniemy, and that's it. But I think part of what it makes Andy special is Andy, even though he's old, he innovates like a young coach. He's not stuck in his ways. Look at Harbaugh. He gets rid of what's his name, the offensive coordinator after
Greg Roman.
Who leads and brings Tom Monken in, a college guy. So I think there are guys who are willing, but the coaching fraternity also, is a lot of that's my guy.
But
the reason
maybe
Joe Barry
and I don't
is still
know
the defensive coordinator.
Well, I was just gonna say, I don't know this for a fact, but maybe part of it's luck too. It's not to bring up the Steelers again, but the Steelers Matt Canada, he's a young, does a lot of motion, play action. Let's get that guy in. It didn't work out. But if it did work out, it looks like, a genius, move. Maybe that's something similar.
Luke
I don't know
what
comes
from the Shanahan LaFleur tree, and it didn't work out. Some guys can, it's tough. When it's all on you to create the offense, it's a lot of responsibility. It's a huge, important job. I think there was the tweet today. The Saints let go of their offensive coordinator. Can't think of his name, but he had the job. If you look it up for me, I think Adam Schefter tweeted out right before we started recording a couple hours ago.
You're right.
He's had the job for 5 years. He was the longest tenured offensive coordinator in the NFL. 5 years.
Pete Carmichael. I didn't even know his name.
So again, that just goes to show you why so many fans and people who analyze the game also say, I want an offensive leaning head coach, because if you have a great coordinator, they're probably going to get a head job somewhere. And if you're a defensive guy, then it's hard to find the next guy. The Bears are on their, I think 13th offensive coordinator in 23 years or something like that. I mean, it's 2 years and they're out, 2 years they're out, 2 years they're out, 2 years they're out. And it's a really, really frustrating thing. And you look around
maybe
the
this
league.
may be biased, but to piggyback off your point there, I feel like there's a lot of defensive coordinators that I can think back to who were great defensive coordinators, but not very good head coaches, right? Like Wade Phillips comes to mind immediately, like elite, coordinator. Vic Fangio, another guy, right off the top of the head. I can't think of an elite offensive coordinator who was a really bad head coach. Maybe Adam Gase.
Gase was the word I was going to go through, but again, his resume was Peyton.
Right. So it's like, how much was it him? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So because a lot of times if you have a good offense, you could be a bad head coach, but if you have a good offense and you're running the ship with the quarterback, I mean, that gives you a longer, leash. And
It's
just
an
interesting thing.
It was a great weekend of football. It was as we said, even though I think you were 4-2 this weekend because you had the Rams, but otherwise feeling like we predicted the majority of the games right.
No,
but
I
also,
went 3-3 because I had the Steelers, the Rams, and the Cowboys winning. And
okay, so I went 5-1. You went 3-3. But it just feels like one of those weekends where you're learning stuff. And just to end on a high note before we kind of preview on Friday's show, which we'll preview the weekend, let me just say this as a little nugget for Friday's show to kind of leave you with to think about. We're going to talk, you're going to hear a lot over the next couple of days of the rest versus rust, right? And the Texans are coming off of a huge win at home, and already the public money is on Texans. That line has come down. They're betting the Texans to upset the Ravens. My gut looking at these games already likes all the home teams. There's going to probably be a road team that wins. You got to remind yourself of that. There's going to probably be a road team that wins. And so when you really think about these matchups, go a little deeper than just who played well and then who sat. Because I think if you look at some of these matchups and where these teams come from and how they're playing now, I'm predicting a big upset next on Friday that I'm going to hold on to your butts for. I think it's good. As of right now, my gut is leaning a certain way, and it's going to be. I think it's going to be a great weekend coming up.
Wild. All right. Well, looking forward to it. Hope you'll join us on Friday for that awesome discussion and to interact online. Just go to Twitter. Hit us up there. That's probably the best spot. Or leave us a comment in the YouTube comments, and we'll respond. We're interested to hear your thoughts on how this wildcard weekend went, and of course on Friday, be interested to hear all of your thoughts on how these predictions may be panning out or how they jive with your predictions. But that'll do it for our recap of wildcard weekend. Getting ready now for several games coming up between 8 teams. We got 4 games now this weekend, Saturday, Sunday. A lot to look forward to here. But that has been the Football Lounge with Mark and Dan. We'll see you back here next time.